Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel for Environment, Communities and Partnerships. On the agenda, our first item is apologies. We've got a number of apologies.
So we have apologies this evening from Councillors Criswell and McAdam, and there's also an apology from Councillor Alban, who will be here, but is just going to be delayed for the start.
Item 1, minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes from the last meeting? Are you happy for me to sign them off? So item 2, members' interest. Has anyone got any interest they need to declare? Nope. Moving on then to item 3, the Overview and Scrutiny Working Programme. Is everyone, any comments about the programme? Anything you want to bring up about the programme?
And just obviously make you all aware, councillors, there is training in the calendars for next Wednesday, and that will start to formulate part of the work programme going forward. So I'm aware that's come out to you in your diary. So if you are able to attend, that would be really helpful, because obviously that's going to help formulate and progress the work programme into the sort of coming 12 to 18 months. So that will be there. So obviously the work programme in here at the moment, happy to answer questions on anything that's current and sort of historic, but future items will be developed from next week, as it were, if that's okay.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I was just looking at I think I'm looking at the right section, forgive me. The Huntingdon Priority Landscapes is due for consideration at Cabinet on the 10th of September, but it's not tonight's meeting. Is there a reason for that?
There was a couple of items which were then moved into October, into the autumn, just due to the seasonality of that section. There's been a bit of a sort of just a little bit of a timeline issue on that, so it's sort of pushed back into the autumn at the moment. But we'll have that coming through. So as soon as I've got an update on that, we'll have that updated on the next notice of key decisions, which should be published in the next couple of weeks, I believe. Sorry.
So I presume it's not going to Cabinet on the 10th? No, that's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the current working programme? Councillor.
Yeah, I just want to take the opportunity to comment around seeing as the community health and wellbeing strategy is coming back today following the principal paper. Just like to show my appreciation to officers for coming to the principal paper previously, giving us a chance to engage and truly shape that as a panel. So just want to thank that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any comments to make about any future plans or anything they might want to bring to the table? In that case, we're moving on. We're now going to switch items around. So we're going to go, rather than going straight to item 4, we're going to go to item 5 and then move back to item 4. It was felt it was a sensible route to take because it would explain item 4 better if we were discussing item 5 first. So we'll move on to item 5, the Priority 1 Delivery Update Q1.
Councillor Kerr, can I invite some guests to join us at the table who'll be part of the presentation? So one of the reasons we asked to swap the items round is we've got some partners joining us to help explain and sort of demonstrate what we've been working on, and rather than keep them here to last knockings at 10 o'clock, it might give them a chance to go home and have their tea. So I hope people don't mind that. I'll hand across to Councillor Pitt just to give an introduction.
Thank you very much. Good evening, councillors. So I'll keep this very brief. I'm delighted to have so many people sitting on this side of the table today. I'll hand straight back to Oliver to do introductions in a moment. But I guess there's 2 parts to this. So really excited to hand over to our experts about the content of the report that you got in front of you, but also keen to hear about, whether the presentation is to your likings, anything, the way we presented it this evening is different to previously. If there's more or less or different, then keen to have that feedback too. So I'll hand straight back to Oliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. So, just to sort of cite this, one of the things that I've heard in supporting this panel over recent times is that real desire for you to get into the detail and help to shape some of the things that we're doing. And there have been a fleet of reports right back from COVID into warm spaces, into the financial vulnerability work that Paul Fox brought to this panel, where we've talked about some of these factors. But I'm always conscious that telling you things isn't as good as showing you things. And what we've committed to do is to bring regular updates around priority one, which is around improving the quality of life for local people, which is most relevant to this panel, on an ongoing basis, in much the same way as the climate change kind of updates have been brought. So exactly as Councillor Pitt says, this is the first attempt, and there's a lot of slides here, and we'll go through them quite quickly because you've all had them in advance. But it gives you the chance to go to those areas where you're most interested, but also to provide some feedback about which bits you found most useful. And I expect in debate afterwards, there might be some feedback you want to provide or some opportunities for further discussion as we move forward. So this will be coming on a regular basis. Just a comment on timing as well. This is always the most tricky because Q1 of the year ends in June, but the nature of the August break means we're in September before you see it. So inevitably, we're almost 5 months through the year before we're talking about the first 3 months. So some of that stuff will overrun, but I'm sure you'll forgive us for that. And critically for us, this is about seeking your input. You're the experts in your area. You're the people speaking to your residents day in, day out, in helping to inform how this kind of work moves forward. So without further ado then, what I would like to do is start by introducing our guests. So all of you will be well aware of Claudia, our community manager, who is a stalwart at the council. But Emma, could I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Emma Buff. I'm the Integrated Neighbourhood Programme Manager for Huntingdonshire. I also look after the Huntingdon PCN. So I don't know if you're all familiar with integrated neighbourhoods, but we basically work within the community to try and make services around health and wellbeing work better and integrate more into the community, filling gaps where we can and making the systems that already exist work better together.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. And again, one of the bits of context around all of this is the Integrated Care Act that was introduced about 2 or 3 years ago placed a duty on local government to work preventatively with health, and we now have a duty to do that. This is really showing how we're doing that in action. And then a colleague, Rob Marshall, the Advice Service Coordinator at CAB. Rob, would you like to say a quick hello?
Hi everyone, Rob Marshall, like Ollie says, the Advice Service Coordinator for Rural CAMS Citizens Advice, and my role is to link our services up with different projects within our organisation and externally so that we're increasing the overall efficiency and the collaborative nature of what we do to the benefit of residents, clients. We call them different things, but they're the people who live in our location. Thank you.
Lovely. So, as I say, there's a fair number of slides. You've seen them all in advance. We'll skip through them relatively quickly. I'm more than happy to go back to any of them. It will be a bit of a sort of a double act, but we'll try and get through in about 15 minutes and then give plenty of time for sort of conversation and debate afterwards. So could you click on, please? So in terms of the purpose of what we're trying to do here is, remind us all of that overall approach we're taking to improve the quality of life, and update on those activities that form part of the regular kind of performance reporting that goes to the other panel. But because it goes to the other panel, you don't get to see it. So this is stuff that's routinely reported, but you don't always get to see it. So what are we doing? What are the results in terms of those areas? And critically, item 3, hello, Councillor Orban, is seek your feedback on, what are your areas seeing? Is this working? What role can you take in promoting this approach and making sure it's having the most impact it possibly can? So improving the quality of life for local people is priority 1 in our corporate plan. So 3 priorities, as you will recall, and it's very much kind of 3 levels of that. 1 is improving the happiness and well-being of all residents, and keeping people out of crisis and helping people in crisis. And you'll see by the partners in the room and how we're presenting this, this is how we're kind of discharging this on a day-to-day basis. This is a sort of diagram you'll have seen before in the principles paper on community wealth building. And these are the kind of contributions that various factors make to health outcomes. So, your overall kind of quality of life. And I think the key thing and the reason we've got different partners around the table, as you can see there, about 40% of overall health outcomes relate to socioeconomic factors. If you're struggling to put food on the table or you're struggling to put a roof over your head, your health outcomes are likely to be much, much worse. And actually only around 20% of health outcomes are actually about clinical care. So what we're trying to do is make sure that at all times, we're working holistically to understand and prevent issues before they arise. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do in all of these places when we're trying to prevent crisis or deliver outcomes is find people who need help and link them to the right solution and make that as easy as we possibly can is the absolute foundation of what we're trying to do. And community wealth building and trying to increase jobs, increase local spend, is a key part of it, increasing our opportunity to do that. Okay, so that's the background. So what we're going to take you through today is these 12 areas, which are 12 specific areas of work that are discharging on what we're doing in terms of priority one, improving quality of life. And we'll step through these in time, showing you the results and welcome input and feedback. So, over the last 2 years, we've been lucky enough to have £500,000 worth of financial support from the Integrated Care Board, Health, fundamentally, to support outcomes for our local residents. Now, we've talked about that on multiple occasions. The first year was around addressing health inequalities, where we worked with community organisations, and I'll update on that, around how do we reach people who benefit from physical activity and drive that forward. And then over the last year, which we're going into a bit more detail now, we've had something called the Community Health Prevention Project, where we worked hand in glove with Emma and her team around identifying people who are health are concerned about and referring them into a lot of the services that we provide as a council to deliver real tangible results. But I think that partnership working of using money jointly to deliver better outcomes has really delivered results way beyond what we could have done if we tried to have done it alone. So under that work of the last 12 months, there have been 4 key priorities. Looking to target cardiovascular disease prevention, so issues around heart disease and other factors to do with the circulatory system. How do we address that? More physical activity, those areas. You'll have heard me many times talking about the fact that our over 75 population is going to double in the next 20 years. Frailty is one of the growing challenges we've got as an area. How do we intervene to prevent those terrible outcomes when people fall and break a hip and their life their life declines? Place-based work in the Oxmoor on the back of data from health, and then again work around driving and supporting the work that we did last year with those community groups as well. So as part of this, a range of activity has been undertaken both with community groups and with our active lifestyle teams. We've had 7 community partners who've been delivering part of this work as well, and we've worked holistically across a range of partners to deliver all of that. But ultimately, what you'll be interested in is the results. So the key part of this scheme, and Emma, please come in, if you wish, has been not just advertising things and hoping people will turn up, but is using health data to identify people that they're concerned about. These are people who are frail. These are people with cardiovascular risk factors that exist and we have been unable to address. Sending them messages relating to services that we offer, and the level of sign-up and engagement with those offers has been really, really significant. So as you can see, in terms of frailty, we've had nearly 4,000 attendances in terms of people who've had frailty, 450 individuals, 87 regular participants, but significantly 41% of those completed a full cohort of the kind of programme, and not only benefited from the health outcomes in relation to that, we'll speak about that, but also the social connection that came from being part of a group, making friends, enjoying it, and all the feedback that came from that. Similarly with cardiovascular disease, 240 individuals, over 50% of people that completed the scheme as well. What we've also run is Staying Active and Active Health Extra courses, again a 9-week course and a 12-week course. Again, look at the level of completers there that have completed this. And what this is taking is physical activity and turning it to a health intervention. Of actually, not giving medication to resolve an issue, but physical activity, but again, critically in that social setting. And I think what, you can see some of the feedback there from residents. What people are reporting is, I come because I enjoy it. I like the people who are there, and actually it being something that's enjoyable rather than, you've got a problem, you need to do something about it.
And just to add on that one of the real tangible things that we've been able to do for those Staying Active courses across all of Huntingdonshire is invite patients from GP practices to attend the courses. And we've found that actually by giving that nudge, as the quote says there, it really encourages people to try it. And it's a very calm, relaxed environment. They're not pushing anybody to go further than they feel that they're able to. And because they are that specially trained those specially trained instructors, everybody feels really comfortable. And often we're finding that people that I don't know if we have a slide on this later, but the future attendances after taking part in these courses have been really beneficial. And actually we're seeing that people are making full lifestyle changes rather than just attending for a 9-week course and then going back to the kind of sedentary lifestyle that they were in. And some of the fitness tests and the functional fitness tests have proven medical results. So they are real things like grip strength is a really good indicator of frailty, and how by improving that, you're looking at your outcomes in the next 10, 20 years of your life. So it's a real bonus, and every cohort, I feel like the results get better and better. So just a big thank you really from Health for the part that we can play in this.
And again, just to remind on this is all health funding. But it's health funding delivering it in partnership. But exactly as Emma said, I think some of the critical things is there are times at which we think because someone's potentially frail, it means they're also financially vulnerable as well. But often that's not the case. And actually what we've found, and what we try to build into all of this, is providing something that's additional to what we've done before, but also sustainable. And what we find is because people enjoy it, they're prepared to pay for it. So actually those courses go from being something that we offer free initially to actually continue because people love it and it's well worth £3 a class or whatever it is, and they endure into the future. And exactly as Emma says there, what you can see is the increasing functional fitness that comes from that. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment in turning that into reductions in the likelihood of things like trips and falls. So actually, a chair sit and reach might not feel like much, but that lessens the risk of you falling over and breaking your hip. Now that comes with a very real financial, challenge, but also a terrible quality of life kind of outcome if we don't get that right. Again, in addition to that kind of that work that we've just presented there, we've also got some outreach work. We've always been at pains to try and reach all areas, of the district and recognising those challenges. So a range of different providers there delivering services across the area. Everything from water sports type activity, reaching out to people who haven't accessed physical activity at Grafton Water, an accessibility football club in Brampton and Buckton. We've done some work with Peterborough United, including some really innovative stuff in terms of outreach, in terms of lateral flow style tests that flag your risk about cardiovascular and heart disease issues. So a little bit of a blood prick, it kind of identifies your cholesterol and a range of other factors as a motivation for people to kind of, actually it's not just a good thing to do, actually you will really benefit from some of that stuff and take that forward as well. And this is the point I'm going to hand to Emma just to talk about some of the specifics on the Oxmoor.
So the Oxmoor is an area that when we were looking at health data showed that some of the worst outcomes in terms of health were practices around the Oxmoor and residents living on the Oxmoor. It's a area where we have two kind of quite distinct populations. You have quite a transitory population, but then you also have that generational population, people that have always lived, grew up, lived there, have their children now live there. So it's a real kind of very different populations living together in one place. We have done a lot of work on not just what we can do in terms of their health, but what we can do in the factors that that feed into their health. So we've been doing lots of things with the Conagear Centre. We have the bundle of offers, which is looking at skills training, so free training that's available to over 18s. We have that in terms of online training, also the ability to attend an in-person course in Peterborough with that training and that travel paid for afterwards. We work with How Are You Huntingdon to make sure that we've got lots of activities available on there. And one of the ones that's really exciting that we're just about to start the second pilot cohort of is Escape Pain. So it's looking at those who are experiencing chronic osteoarthritis in either their knee or their hip. Through the funding that we have and through our work with HDC, we're able to offer that for free to residents who are referred by their GP to this course. So the first cohort, we had 11 participants who took place. It's you go twice a week for 6 weeks. and 73% completed, which was really great. And even those that didn't complete, quite often, kind of due to the nature of the injuries, they sometimes weren't able to meet that threshold, but were very close by it. The real positive out of it is that in everyone but one participant, we saw an improvement in every single score that we measure. So that's ability to cope with their pain, their quality of life, and their kind of optimism around the condition that they're feeling. We are also aware that a lot of people on that list are either waiting for or have just had an operation at one of the hospitals around their pain, and they're either helping with their recovery or helping prepare for that operation. It's a really nationally recognised programme. It's really exciting that we're doing it in Huntingdon, and the second cohort I know started this week, so I'm sure we'll come back with their figures on how that's done as well.
And in good news, we've been really frugal in terms of how we've used that money. I've talked about getting people to contribute where they can and so on. And because of that, we've been able to use that money to stretch it out to the end of the year and run further courses as Emma's described. So you'll see more updates on that as we move forward. And this is the basket of offers. So another example. So the three things that we talk about in the the Community Health and Wealth Fund is the kind of three factors that really contribute to great outcomes. So employment, and economic success, social connection, and physical activity. They're really the three things that kind of drive quality of life. The flyer on the left there was hand delivered to all households on the Oxmoor. When you look at the offers on the bottom, they absolutely map to those three outcomes. So in terms of employment and financial success, we've got the money advice, we've got the skills and employment. The skills and employment offer is funded through CPCA money that we bid for. So again, making use of partnership money. In terms of physical activity, we as a council have been proactive in terms of offering a free pass into our leisure centres. Now, not just because of some of the benefits Emma's described, but really it's upfront marketing. We're so confident that if you try our gyms for free, you'll want to join permanently because they're excellent facilities. So, we're progressive enough to kind of recognise some of that stuff. But the social connection activity in terms of support from your local area, making sure people understand what community groups are out there to support them, but also the volunteering opportunities that will bring them in contact with other people, but also mean that they're giving something back as well. And when you click on the QR code at the top, you're taken through to a website with all those links, the opportunity to pass those things through. And we're then able to pull out the data on what people are clicking on, what's working, what's not, and address and amend as we go forward. And I talked a little bit about the money we spent last year in terms of the £250,000. The headlines here is the money's all, we've stopped giving money to those groups, but 100% of the activities that we funded are continuing in some form or other. So again, some of the things that really kind of leap out for me is things like the use of Kimbolton swimming pool. So again, an area that's quite a long way from one of our gyms. Some proactive work with the school where we funded some activity, but the people who took up that offer enjoyed it so much that they're now paying. And Kimbolton are saying, well, that's great. Why wouldn't we continue that? And we've opened up a sustainable access to a pool that previously didn't exist. But there are a lot of other good examples there as well. And then Claudia and I will pick this up. Again, kind of developing that offer, one of the things that, we'd kind of got to a conclusion on was seeing the impact of people being out of work in terms of kind of being on a sick note. They're called fit notes now. But the evidence is really clear that if you're on a fit note for more than a month, there's about a 50% chance that you'll be out of work for 6 months. And we know that being in employment and economic success is one of the greatest things in terms of health. So really, we want to get you back to work quicker. So what can we do in terms of that area? So some of the conversations, that we developed led to this kind of model of us saying we will fund someone to work in the surgery, to spot those people, to try and do that holistic referral with them. Other people think the same. And we've just won £2.9 million worth of funding as for Cambridge and Peterborough as a whole to pilot exactly that kind of activity. So Claudia, would like to say a little bit about this, of the bid that we've submitted and how we're proposing to take that forward as part of the WorkWell scheme.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, so as part of the presentation, you'll hear a bit more about the Resident Advice and Information team. So they speak directly with our residents daily about any issue. It could relate to council tax, debt, a bereavement, but often what does come up is their financial situation, and it could be because they're not working, they've been out of work, they're struggling to find employment. So the approach that we're proposing to take is we're already speaking to those people about work and finding work, getting back into work. And this was an opportunity for us to use the skill set, working alongside CAB and others to really get the support that these people need to get them back into work, understanding their situation, but their situation as a whole. So rather than dealing with one issue that finds themselves in that means they're in that situation, actually working through it methodically, understanding the reasons for the situation and prioritising them. So it isn't just about finding a job, it's wholly unpicking and understanding what it is they need to get to the outside. So exciting times, really.
And I think just in terms of the specifics, what this will look like is referrals from GP practices about people on fit notes. We will engage with them about all of those holistic issues. Why is it you're not in work? Well, actually, I'm really struggling with debt. That's really led to a spiraling mental health issue. Well, let's solve that for you. Or I feel isolated or whatever. Or actually, I've got a real bad problem with my back. Well, actually, we can get you an emergency referral to a physio. Can we get you back into work quickly? Knowing that some of those outcomes will come forward. But we're looking at 6 figures worth of funding, integrated across the teams to support some of those outcomes as we move forward. And then again, I'm going to hand back to Claudia to talk through some of the specific activities that her team is delivering on at the moment.
Something that sadly comes up a lot in terms of the conversations that the advisors have is around domestic abuse. So as an organisation, we're committed to supporting victims of domestic abuse. So we have committed to achieving an accreditation, so the DAHA accreditation, and that is identifying members of staff and training for staff to work with customers who come forward and need that help, but also internally as an organisation. So we have an action plan and we're working towards achieving that action plan. And I think the most important thing is the number of staff that have stepped forward as champions. So actively recognising the needs based around domestic abuse, awareness raising campaigns, information going out to the people that we're working with, but often it's a subject that isn't talked about, and we are seeing more people who need support in this area, and we're now in a position where we're equipped to help them and provide referrals and signposting really quickly. Sorry, me again. And I welcome Ben to step in as well because he's been heavily involved with the community chest. So for those of you that are aware, we have a ring fence pot each year of about £30,000. During COVID, we went out to the community and we said, this is a reactive pot directed wholly around a response to the pandemic. Come forward with your ideas so that we can get projects up and running really, really quickly. We've learnt massively from that process, and Ben was instrumental, Councillor Pitt was instrumental in carrying out a review of the criteria that has seen many, many more applicants come forward to the community chest and seen projects that we would never have dreamed of contributing to previously, in the form of tricycles for people with disabilities, in the form of community gardens that are solely run. All we've done is the seed funding to get them the equipment that they need. They're now growing vegetables and planting things, and it's where families spend time. It's been really good in terms of seeing those projects come forward. We'll continue to review the criteria to make sure that it meets our priorities, but it's great that we've been able to open that up to more people.
Thanks, Claudia. And Ben's always fine, by the way. Just to add to that, I somewhat missed Councillor Hassell's input on the panel for community chest grants, but it's one of the most enjoyable parts of the job that I do. The range is always exciting. I'm probably the most curmudgeonly grant panel member that anyone's ever met, and but when we're able to fund projects, it's really great that we can. Just to flag up for those who may not be aware, so the total, so the maximum cap that we now offer has increased from, it was years ago it was 5,000, it went down to 1,000 during COVID, and it's now back up to 2,500, just to reflect, costs have increased, but also we realised that £1,000 doesn't go a long way, and some projects clearly deserve more than that. So we do tend to get applications coming around on an annual basis from certain very good bid writers, but we're always keen to see as much variety as possible. So please spread the word, make sure that local community groups in your wards and elsewhere knows about this fund. Also, we had a kind of a bit of a vague policy on whether we funded one-off events. Now we've tightened that up. So basically for one-off, I think we call it short-term events, which is less than 4 days, we fund up to £1,000 and 20% of that total cost of delivering the event. So that's to recognise that we don't want to get into the habit of funding, like to becoming sort of the first port of call to fund recurring events, but we really recognise the value of these big community events that bring people together. And so if we can make a contribution towards them, we're really keen to do so. So yeah, please do spread the word and make sure we are inundated with high quality applications. Thank you.
So just a bit on assets of community value. So we recognise that there are places within communities that are really important to people, and there is a real fear around losing those. We have a committee that sits to receive applications that relate to particular places. And it's an opportunity for parish councils, community groups to submit an application to protect basically an asset that is recognised as having been valued by the community over a previous period of time. So just a couple of examples there. We've got the Stukely's Hotel, the pub in Hemmingford, but also a fishing lake. And often these come about because people have concerns around areas changing, future development, and they just don't want to lose that asset. And we've seen more and more come forward in the last 12 months than previously. We've got a panel coming in the next couple of weeks, and we've got 6 to consider on that. So it's just demonstrating that people are holding these places as very, very valuable places to meet people, socialise, spend time, and it's important that we consider those and recognise those views.
And I think these last two are really good examples of, we say do enable influence in our corporate plan. It sounds like a phrase. Actually, this is showing that there's small things we can do to protect these things, the way we enable things to happen. We don't have to deliver things at times, we've just got to help people protect things. But a bit of an advert, if there are assets in your communities that have really significant community value, please do submit them, and they can be added to the register, which gives them greater protection over being developed or whatever in the future.
So we have a number of schemes running in relation to support to refugees. So you may have been involved in one guise or another with the work around the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So we've seen over 400 people arrive from Ukraine and be supported by residents in Huntingdonshire. We've provided support to asylum seekers, and we are moving towards providing additional support to the Afghan community as well. All of this has been provided through our residents. So it is them themselves that provide the match with the refugee. We have just been there to direct and signpost. In terms of the funding, so we've received external funding to provide this support. Actually, we have been held up in Huntingdonshire as the best example in terms of sustaining the relationship between guest and host. And being able to sustain longer than 6 months that home offer, which has helped reduce the need for temporary accommodation and unsuitable housing, and meant that we've been able to support people into the right accommodation at the right time through a transition period. So really successful piece of work. One of the projects that incredibly passionate about is the food support. So this is just one example of some work that we've been doing on Oxmoor. So we work with an organisation called Food for Naught, who redistributes food, and working with the community group, they have been instrumental in identifying and securing volunteers to run a community food fridge, and getting people there who need the support, getting food into that offer, and alongside that being able to offer support in a bigger way. So we're now offering outreach at the fridge from our resident advice team. And we've got one example up there of somebody who started as a volunteer and has now moved into employment. And they've said that that is as a result of having the support wrapped around them to get to that point. And in terms of our resident advice and information team, so the team is based here at Pathfinder House. So earlier in April, they moved to being based here full time. The team works with referrals coming in from a variety of means, so community groups via internal, external services, and they will work with people who have any issue. I think the key thing is there is no time restraints in terms of we'll only work with them for a certain period of time. We will continue to work with them for as long as they need us. Many people will need one phone call, one little piece of advice. Others will continue to be involved for a longer period of time, because as you start with one problem, it just unravels into a mass of things. And actually, we're seeing some really, really good successes in terms of that engagement.
And if you don't mind, just before I hand across to Rob, I think, two of the things that we've committed to and we've delivered is, as Rob will tell you, CAB are now completely co-located next to the resident advice and information team. And also we now have health in the building for the first time. So all social prescribers in relation to kind of North Huntingdon are now based out of the building too. When you look at those referral numbers in the top box, the leap from about sort of 250, 300 referrals up to 400 is the month that health moved into the building. And actually what we've seen is, for as much as you try and do some of these things through conversations and meetings, having people working in the next desks, talking to each other, is delivering, real tangible results and benefits for everyone involved. Click on, please. Some details there about reason for contact, which I won't dwell on. Some nice feedback in terms of what residents are saying. And, some of the cases we've seen are quite harrowing. You start having a conversation around something quite superficial and ends up in a conversation around domestic abuse or other factors too. But it's giving people that space and time to deal with their issues holistically, pick them up and refer them to the right places. So that, finding people, linking them to solutions. It's pretty simple stuff, but the partnership is critical to enabling us to do that. And Rob, this is your chance to shine.
Okay, so we relocated to Pathfinder House a couple of months ago, and with the aim to increase the collaborative working. As Ollie has mentioned, literally walking past people who are dealing with similar clients or similar residents, that we can talk about, we can discuss and move them forward. It increases our overall efficiency and effectiveness at helping those individuals. So as an organisation, I've been working very closely with Alison, who leads the resident advice and information team. She has arranged, and we've had two now, you were at the last one, the cross teams meeting. So, and that's not just HDC, that's also, as Ollie said, the health teams from the above Pathfinder and ourselves, and beginning to see how all of these people who require our help, how we can link up. So at Citizens Advice, we often pick up those who are in the phase of needing help because they're in crisis. And our aim is then, as a phrase that's been used a fair bit, which is holistic advice. Ollie's mentioned it, and I think you did as well, Claudia. Holistic advice is the aim of slowly moving from resolving a crisis to giving that individual greater financial resilience or resilience in their circumstances so that you can prevent or help to prevent future crisis. And generally then the aim and the end point is to end up with an informed person who has an improved position, health, financial and everything else, and the way that all links up. So it's actually quite fascinating for me to sit here as part of Citizens Advice and really quite be impressed by this whole move that the council is using, and being part of that is certainly something we're really behind. So yeah, I can't think. Oh, we have started so the referrals that the Residents Advice and Information team sends to us, that's now on a live feedback system, so that they are constantly getting updated as to where we got with those clients. This in turn, Ollie has said, because they have less constraints over their time, they're able to then, those clients that don't engage with us or that there are barriers to prevent them engaging from us, the Residents Advice and Information team are working to break down those barriers. Then they're coming back with those solutions, and that's helping those who are extremely vulnerable within our community. So that's something we're going to continue to strengthen. We're going to continue to work on with the Residents Advice and Information team. The cross-team meeting that we had last week has opened up discussions for me to start talking to the social prescribers. I keep saying subscribers, I do apologise. The social prescribers, because again, they have a lot of clients who need additional support. So I think this overall collaborative working, the different organisations, different agencies in a co-location is going to have a really positive effect for the community. To add to that, we have the move to Pathfinder House has enabled us to open up additional outreaches within the Huntingdonshire area. So we've now got outreach, a new outreach at Ramsey, which is in the library, a new outreach at St Ives, which is also in the library, and there is one the first Wednesday of the month in St Ives, Burley Hill Common. I think that is the library there as well. Oh, the community centre. Thank you. So, as well as that, we obviously we are still in St Neots, and we are also in Pathfinder House itself. It's currently 2 days, but again, because we've opened up these lines of communication, we talk to facilities. We have the 4 rooms, and we've just had confirmation that we can use those rooms on the ground floor. So now my job is to go back to my Chief Executive Officer and say I want to put services in there, extend the services that we're offering. The contact centre does a good job of speaking to a lot of clients from across the patch. The increase of the face-to-face is to help those people who are most vulnerable. The contact centre may be able to deal with, say, 97% of the population, but the 3% that can't deal with telephone calls, that's why we need the face-to-face, and we need to get it into areas they can reach. And we're getting there across Huntingdonshire. There are gaps, and those are the areas we're now trying to get a drop in so that we have those services available for clients. And I think that may be doing it.
So my optimism at the start of we'll be done in 15, 20 minutes has been misplaced. But you will be reassured to know this is the final slide. So what next? And this comes back to my opening comments of this kind of took us to the end of June, but now we're in September. So some of these things have already happened. So as you've heard, CAB have moved to Pathfinder House, which is good news. Those weekly CAB outreach sessions have been rolled out, as you've just heard. So trailer alert for the next update. The service design officer, so a key role is the person who looks at the data to inform where do we need to go next. So what you've heard today is a lot of evidence-based activity. If we work in this area because there's an issue, of actually someone in Claudia's team to do that work, to pull it together, and probably be sitting here in this position, hopefully, for the update next time. The council tax debt project, so again, something we've talked about previously, of taking people with council tax debt, reaching out to them holistically and trying to resolve those issues is something that's already underway and kind of rolling forward. And it was going to be the end of Household Support Fund, but in live update, that's been extended for 6 months. So that's some good news too. But at that point, thank you for your patience and very much welcome kind of feedback and reflections. Has this been useful? And what do your communities and your residents need that perhaps we should be taking away to think about?
Thank you, Oliver, and the team. I'm blown away. I'm sitting here thinking, aren't we? We're so blessed to have you working, and what you do is absolutely amazing. I just wanted to thank you. Thank you for the presentation, but thank you for the work you're doing. So, opening it up to the panel, have anyone got any questions or comments? Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you guys. It's amazing what you are doing, and really want to thank you for that. With regards to the elderly population, obviously loneliness is a big issue. What are you doing to help with that?
The simple answer is lots. So we have things like the over 60s groups that are run via Active Lifestyles. We also support the Conagear Centre. They have a very, very popular seniors group on a Wednesday. Has around about 60 people that go every Wednesday for 2 activities and a hot meal. And we find that actually what happens as a result of attending one of these sessions is that often then they'll say, oh, well, I do my shopping on a Tuesday. Shall we meet for a cup of tea after? And that really helps us with the loneliness. There's always more that we can do, and we're always conscious when we move into the winter months that there's normally more that we can do. One of the parts of the work that I'm doing with the doctor's surgeries at the moment is looking at personalised care for older people and those that practices are worried about, and that always kicks up a notch in the winter. And I think being co-located now will help with some of those discussions, that if we find someone that we're worried about, we can point them towards lots of the other sort of services to make sure that they're being looked after in every aspect rather than just the health side.
Because I was just wondering, with the befriending services for those that can't go out to all the activities and things that are going on, are you joining up with, say, like Age UK and other organisations, or?
Yes, we are. They did have a quite a large funding cut recently, so we are we're working with them. We had a meeting with them not that long ago to look at what we can do around proving the need, so that almost they can then ask for more funding. So we're always happy, and we're linked in very well with the residents advice team to make sure that we're pushing those referrals through now that we know that that's the way that we want to handle it. So.
I think everyone wants to come in, Councillor. So apologies. I think one of the things I'd point to as well is just broader stuff. So, I showed the flyer that we said we handed out on the Oxmoor. Every new mover to the area gets one of those too. So some of it is we're trying to build this in for everyone. If you move to the area, you get that flyer, actually join up with your local community group or volunteer. So we're trying to embed that principle of everyone to get a chance to get involved before it becomes kind of, older, isolated people. So I think that's really important. But things like how we did community warm spaces. So Councillor Orban, I think you had one in Stilton Parish, didn't you? I think Councillor Bywater, there was one at Coresco, I think. But the way we've kind of supported that was, rather than setting something up that we did and when the money came away it disappeared, of supporting the community groups because they're still there. So when someone goes along to Coresco and they go to the warm space, they're still, the Coresco will still be there in the summer, when they go along. So trying to use the infrastructure that's always, already there to support some of those outcomes too, I think is central to try the way we've worked as well.
Many of the people that the resident advice team come into contact are older people, and it's often can start with concerns about finances and affordability. And through that process, we are, making referrals out to groups, but also schemes that are available in terms of home visiting and befriending. We're really lucky that we have somebody who's joined the resident advice team from Age Concern. So we basically have a whole font of knowledge within this person, which is absolutely brilliant. She is now the lead for the older people. The other thing is as well, throughout COVID, where we saw that natural development of community groups, again, what often came out weekly to Ollie and I in the meeting that we had with those groups was around the isolation and loneliness of people. And something we're just working on again is how we support those groups naturally to come back to the surface to deal with some of those issues, whether it's, dropping off a crossword through the letterbox, sharing a magazine, or those sorts of things, just knowing who your neighbour is. So we're going to revisit some of that method of working, and those groups are still active. We just need to support them to grow the volunteer numbers, which we're doing with Hunts Forum.
Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work that you collaboratively have all done throughout this whole process. I've got a few comments to make. I think the first thing is picking up on the domestic abuse side. I've previously worked with Cambridge City, who've gone through DAHA, I think twice now, the accreditation. So it's worth engaging with other councils in the area to see if what can be lessons learned and work and follow what they might be doing. And also the Police and Crime Commissioner, I know they do a lot of work again for domestic violence and women and girls, and also the White Ribbon campaign, again worth getting involved in, and all of the hard work there. I also want to say with the community chest side, my ward, both villages, Hilton and Dunstanton, have both really thoroughly gotten on board and developed their own community spaces. I think now it's almost looking like how do they've thrived, both of them have thrived really well. But for the longer term sustainability of them now carrying on, how can, it's just a sort of rhetorical question, but how can Hunts help in terms of making them their own financially sustainable on themselves, and how they can keep going, or would they have to keep on being reliant on the community chest grant, and what are those relationships, how are you feeding backwards and forwards between those community groups, because I know they really have embraced it and it's been fantastic, and it's just now looking at the future with working with them. And then the other question I sort of had, it just ties in with Councillor Lowe's point, the community, so with Age UK, the community warden side, I know in my ward, we had South Cam's funding towards that, which is a bit funny. And therefore, I presume in your answer, it is also looking at community wardens in terms of that activity and working with them. And I think, again, I know there's some very active members in my ward who really want to push for that. But again, it's all about scoping the needs versus that. So I endeavour to push on with that work. But this is really great stuff, so thank you.
Thank you. So we are linking in really strongly. So on your first point with neighbouring authorities learning from the work that they've done, we know that Cambridge City have got some excellent examples. They're really, really experienced in the responding to domestic abuse. We're working really closely as well with the County Council, the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Partnership, and the advice that they're providing has been instrumental in getting to where we've got to at the moment, which is fantastic. But we'll definitely make use of that, so thank you. In terms of the community chest, so the idea is that it is that seed funding, it gets projects off the ground. But actually, what the community development team, so my team is there to do, is also enable the longevity of those projects. So, for example, where groups need some help and guidance, we can direct them to Hunts Forum. To it, they may need particular, ability with writing grant applications or getting certain bits of information or criteria in place. They can help with, but also we can sit down and just identify perhaps what is the longer term vision and how they might achieve it. And just point them in the right direction of getting the support that they need. There's lots of opportunity out there. It's just being able to head down the right path. We're really keen that the projects are longer term. You know, and we'll always help with trying to provide that support to get them there.
Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Chair. Just borrowing the microphone there. So, firstly, I'll just say, one of the things I really miss is no longer sitting on the community chess panel. That was one of the most pleasurable things that I did, and it's surprisingly difficult to give out the money, which is quite interesting. So, encouraging more bids to come through would be, I think, of benefit both to us and to the community. I just have a couple of questions, really. I was interested on sounds like fantastic news of the 2.9 million, did you say, work and fit note grant. And is that all attributed to HDC? No, that's what I thought. And just sort of generally, when we're sort of helping people to gain employment and improving their skills, you know, how many people have we helped in that? I didn't see that in the statistics, I don't think.
So sadly, the 2.9 million is across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So we get a slice of that. It's likely to be six figures, but it's not going to be the full 2.9 million.
Yeah, just six figures a bit. So can you give us a bit more of a sort of 2.9 million is quite a lot of money.
So the initial tranche is probably going to be somewhere between 100 and 200,000 pounds, but it's phased delivery over a number of years. So I think that's the key thing. And as well as funding kind of resource at our end, there's also skills advisors, other aspects building up, you know, that overall model, working hand in glove with DWP, with health providers and others. But in many ways, it's similar to what we've seen here, which is I don't think HDC necessarily need the money directly, as long as the partnership works in a holistic way that delivers the outcome we need. I think it's more how the money's spent rather than who gets the money, I think is very much the model that we're seeing. In terms of the outputs from the skills advisors, clearly skills is a big driver at the the combined authority is spending a lot of money on skills. So there's a lot of skills provision out there. We use some money to directly fund skills advisors through the county council that we refer to through those pathways. Hundreds of people have been supported through that, and they've been at the Coney Gear Centre picking up people. We make active referrals on a day-to-day basis. The key point, Councillor Hassel, is I'll make sure those figures are included on the future slides, so you can absolutely see that. But again, I think the key point on a lot of these things is the referral is two-way. So it might be Emma speaks to someone, they're referred into skills, or it might be that someone goes to the skills advisor, has got a financial problem, and they're referred back out to Rob. And I think that's the thing that's very different in the way we've done it, rather than lots of silo delivery, where really, if you have a need beyond that, you're kind of left in isolation.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, and that's probably one of the big things I remember from overview and scrutiny at the combined authority, is that the success of people going forward into employment from the skills things was not nearly as good as we would like it. So any pressure we can apply, and if we can direct things perhaps to other skills providers, I don't know, but it's something to think about.
And just to come back, I couldn't agree more. So all the evidence shows, that the most impactful intervention you can have in someone's life is getting them a good job. That's what pretty much all the evidence shows. However, just saying job available doesn't get somebody who doesn't get a job into work, because there's lots of often structural barriers that mean they can't access it in terms of mental health concern, debt, accessibility of those other offers. Partly what we've done with our skills advisors is making sure that they're referred into so we find the people, we have the conversation around, well, actually the thing that's going to have the biggest impact is work. Oh, well, Emma, thanks for talking to me. Do you know anyone? Yeah, I know my friend Sophie. Let me refer you across. And actually what we're trying to do is break down those barriers and try and address some of those concerns that you've just flagged, Councillor Hassel.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I was frantically trying to make notes then, so forgive me if this is a bit of a disjointed question. So, Oliver, you mentioned the £250,000 funding. Was that for essentially everything we've just seen in that presentation, or was that just the active lifestyles?
Just to help aspects.
Right, lovely. And that was over a 12-month period?
You've got two lots of effectively £250,000 over, so there was 2 years of £500,000 in total.
Okay, it's just because in light of obviously the next agenda item, it was a question of is that funding sufficient? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Always good to hear about the good work that all of your teams are doing, and thank you very much for giving up your evening to come here. Quick question on the citizens' advice move, which sounds like it's gone extremely well and it's extremely worthwhile. I'm just wondering if the space that they vacated at Eastfield has been backfilled yet, because of when it came to this committee last time, it was said that there was a small financial risk, which we all agreed was extremely worthwhile, but just interesting to see if that's progressed.
So the simple answer is we haven't relet it yet. So the move took place in July. We're early September. September at the moment. It hasn't been let yet. However, we have let Space to Health. As I mentioned earlier, they've come in and we've seen both the benefits in terms of the quality of life, but also more space let in the building. And we do have, we are speaking to a range of people at the moment who are interested in taking more space. And I think what we're really seeing, and you've heard it from some of our partners, is people are seeing the benefits of being here as something. So it's a kind of virtuous circle of getting both the rental income and huge benefits from working in a different way too. So we remain confident that we will be able to relet that space.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm just going to say brilliant. Yeah.
Councillor Bywater.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yeah, echo the comments. I think I've been on this journey for quite some time, really. So it's really pleasing to see how this has progressed, how it's evolved over the years since COVID, really, in the tricky days of COVID. And credit to you all 5 or 6 of you who are here today. It's particularly community chest. I do think it's important that we've increased that figure. Really, I think that's really important. I just want to pick up on some points of clarity, really. Nowhere through this document have I heard anything about veterans. And, veterans in Huntingdonshire, we're well known to be a veteran district council, and there's lots of veterans that live within the community. It'd be nice to try and understand the context and how we're supporting veterans. And then the other point, I just want to pick up on escape on the Oxmoor. So I want to try and understand the context that sits behind this, really. So we've had 11 individuals that took part in it, and eight have completed it, so it's 73%. But what numbers sit behind that? So, have we got a huge queue of people waiting to take part in the programme? I'd like to maybe understand that a bit more in the context of it, really. But other than that, it's really good stuff.
So on the escape pane, they have to be quite small cohorts because it's quite intensive work that you're doing over that period of time. So the maximum size for a cohort is 14. So we had 11 that time. I think we've got 13 this time. We're hoping to run at least 2 more throughout the rest of this year. There is a queue, and we are hoping that what we can also do is get some figures from the hospital for people that are on waiting lists as well to kind of bolster that. But we've been doing it a lot through searches within the GP records of exactly that, kind of who's registered as having osteoarthritis, who is taking long-term medication. How can we make sure that we're getting the right treatment to the right people to make the most effective treatment? And I think now that it's started, it is a bit of a word of mouth thing as well, that now that we've started it and people are going away and saying, actually, it has really helped me, it's not just another physio appointment. One of the things that's come out of it, a bit like everything else that we've discussed tonight, is actually the camaraderie between different people that are participating. So they are going, oh yeah, do you find it difficult to put your socks on? Oh yeah, I do as well. And this is the tip that I've learned. So it's not just learning from the instructors, but learning from each other as well. So we're hoping to build on that and to be able to expand it across Huntingdonshire as well.
And Emma, I think what sits behind Councillor Bywater's question as well is how many people on a GP's register do you think might benefit from something like escape pain?
So I think at Priory Fields, if I use that as an example, because that was kind of my base scale, was about 200 we have registered with osteoarthritis that would be at a level. And then they also go through an assessment beforehand to make sure that they're at the right level to be able to do the exercises. So obviously not just had an operation or not to be able to complete the course. And because we've been doing them over the summer as well, there's been things like if you can't commit to the full 6 weeks because you're off on holiday, then you can't do it. So, and that's why we're hoping to carry it on and hopefully see really good results going through. And I would say it's probably around the same in the other practices as well.
So you can see a big cohort there, Councillor Bywater, of people that we can reach out to. I think the future for some of this stuff, and I think it goes on to the next item, is some of those courses deliver very real financial savings to the health system. If we can start to quantify that and see fewer GP, actually, could we get these things to be self-financing? Yeah, exactly right. And it doesn't necessarily, I think going back to the community group, just have to be referrals into active lifestyles or whatever. It could be referrals into Age UK, as you mentioned, or referrals into a local community group or whatever. But I think it's establishing the principles that we're starting to do, create the opportunity around a range of those factors.
Just in terms of your veteran point, Councillor Bywater, you're absolutely right. Often, not only through the resident advice team do we speak to people who are veterans and have found themselves in very difficult circumstances. So we're providing that support there, but we're also committed to working across Cambridgeshire and have made a financial contribution to a post around the Armed Forces Covenant, and we're committed to that and committed to that work. So that does feature, and we can provide some further information in how we're committed to that in future reports if you think that would be useful.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant to hear. I think it would be really useful. And just for disclosure, I'm aware, obviously, as a county councillor about the Armed Forces Covenant, so and also I'm an ex-veteran as well. So just for disclosure, but thank you. I guess I'm just thinking about the Royal British Legion and how they can assist with this, really.
Thanks, Councillor Bywater. And actually, if perhaps we have a conversation offline on that topic, that would be really welcome. Thank you.
Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for being late. This may have been covered in the few minutes before I was here. The first question I've got, but just to sort of round up a few comments. I think every now and again, I don't know about anybody else, but as a councillor, I think, oh my goodness, I didn't realise that. Just when I think I've got a handle on things, something crops up. Like I was at one of my parishes and the resident mentioned it, they couldn't read or write. So how does the parish, it was a parish issue, communicate with that person? So that made me think. And I can remember some years ago being in the job centre in Peterborough when I was out of work, and it's one of those situations, just sitting there waiting for my turn to be called and just suddenly aware of someone else's conversation, and another resident was on the phone to somewhere, to a government department, saying, look, you don't understand, it's a bank holiday Monday, I can't wait till Tuesday, I've got no money. And I think every now and again these kind of things crop up to us as councillors. So the professionals that are on the end of the phones and in the contact centres, I think must be doing a tremendous work, because they'll see a lot more than we do. So my three brief questions, and again, sorry if this was missed before I came. Ollie, you mentioned about health in moving into Pathfinder House. If you could just expand on who is here. Community magazines, it sort of doesn't quite contradict what I said a minute ago about that one resident who couldn't read, but I know there's a lot of community magazines. Councillor Hassel will know Buckton, where I grew up, the Buckton Roundabout was one running for years. Huntingdon Town Council produced a full quality magazine. Home do something on a photocopier. Stilton has it published. There's a whole variety of people that we could link in with if we're not already, rather than produce our own literature, or maybe produce our own literature and have it delivered by the teams that are already out there. And the other thing as well, something that
that clicked with me about disability access. And it came up during COVID, and it was a friend of mine who was very active in the deaf community, and I hadn't realised. I thought, well, there's subtitles on the news. Why can't deaf people understand what's being said? And I had it explained to me that it's not as simple as that. Particularly for someone who was born deaf rather than someone who's acquired deafness later on in life. So how adept are we at adapting when we have a resident with more complex communication needs?
Three excellent questions, Councillor Orban. So I'll take the first two, and I'll probably hand to sort of colleagues to talk about some of the specifics about how we help people with sensory impairments. So in terms of health moving to the building, we're in the fortunate position of having one of the sort of primary care network managers in the building. So basically the person who manages a team of social prescribers. So these are the people who get referrals out of health of people who've got issues that aren't purely clinical. So, they devised some of their own solutions in that area, but what they're seeing and what we've been pushing for a while is a lot of those factors are going to be economic, social, or around kind of physical activity. So actually bringing you in to enable us to have the conversation with John Collins' team around housing or Katie Kelly's team about benefits is delivering huge results. But actually, Duncan Blake, who's the clinical director for Huntingdonshire as a whole, is a GP, but he's the ultimate sort of medical lead. Spends a lot of time in the building too. So in terms of those connections and that kind of activity, it's been absolutely huge in terms of some of those benefits. And it's those small first steps that deliver really unexpected kind of benefits and impact. So that's a simple answer to that. In terms of community newsletters, I completely agree. I think what the research has shown, and we've done a lot of user experience type stuff, is, imagine the kind of picture of the GP notice board, where there's hundreds of different things all posted up. One of the issues we tend to see is when there's lots of things out there, and it kind of goes back to Councillor Hassell's point about skills, people don't know where to start. And often just telling people that there's things out there isn't enough to get them to use them or to understand. Is it the kind of isolation group I need to go to, or is it the financial support group I need to go to? And what we've tried hard to do here is it doesn't matter which door you go to, we'll think about it holistically, and if we're not the right one, we'll put you on to the next one. So in terms of the community newsletters, absolutely we can be promoting these services, but I think we need to be quite careful, and it might be things like the QR code and that kind of stuff, where what we're promoting is those holistic opportunities to get people to engage with it. But I'd be really keen to sort of speak to you, more about that in the future. But what we have seen is, some of those service catalogues are great, but people often can't find the way to get to the right one for them unless there's something to help them triage their way through that process. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, perfect. And then in terms of kind of engagement with people with kind of sensory disabilities, obviously we do a lot in terms of a range of different formats, accessible online stuff, screen reading, that kind of stuff. But yeah, Rob?
I think part of the success of this is going to be in the collaboration of all the different agencies. So we're talking, even in the cross-teams meeting, there was the housing team for the council, there was the Revs and Bens team, the customer services team, you had the social subscribers, I can't say that. You have the social subscribers from upstairs, the residents advice and information team, which is a wraparound service for the council. It's a really, really useful service that the council's put in place there. Obviously, ourselves, Citizens Advice, but not only have you got all these different agencies, these different teams, but they also have their points of reference. They work with other teams that some of us don't know about. And by getting those groups talking to each other, you are opening so many more doors that sooner or later, if we speak to one group or another, so for instance, if I contact Dish, or the residents' advice and information, we talk to Dish, then we learn what support for disabled people is out there. If we're talking to these different groups and getting them to talk to each other, so for instance, I've spoken to Alison, and I'd spoken to someone in the in-work progression team from the DWP, so I put this particular individual in touch with Alison, and it started a new conversation. And it's these conversations which are going to move people to where they need to be, which is what Ollie is saying, as efficiently as possible, without saying, you just need to go over there. You just need to go over there. We can say, look, we'll put you in touch with this person and they'll contact you, or, you know, there's their details, say that you've gone through from us. So it's linking that up, it's making it more effective, it's helping break down barriers for individuals such as people with disabilities or veterans who are suffering because of PTSD or any other symptoms or issues they may have. So it's the efficiency, it's breaking down of barriers, but kind of quite interesting, and I'm a bit weirded out sitting here thinking about it. It means that the resources that we have, which are always limited, are being spent more effectively. And that's the exciting thing for as far as we're concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Hassel?
Yeah, very quick question. Really, it's just I understand there's a partnership we've had over the last 2 years, or finishes this year, I guess, with the NHS. Just wondered what the possibilities were of that renewing in the future.
The Workwell funding is coming through health. So that's it's national funding, but it's being funneled through health. So that's more money that's that I've said is somewhere between 100 and 200,000 pounds. So that's absolutely coming through there. What the other thing that health are doing this year is they've earmarked 650,000 pounds to support community and voluntary sector organisations. So we're working really hard to kind of direct and support that in terms of where we think it'll have most impact. Now, again, what I would expect, what we'll be pushing hard for is speaking to Emma and others about the evidence base of what's needed, how do we direct that. Only yesterday, Claudia and I were with Julie Farrow from Hunts Forum yesterday, again, trying to make sure that we're on the same page of directing some of that funding. So I'm not foreseeing the same £250,000 directly to HDC that we've had in previous years. But ultimately, when we had the money, we gave lots of it to the community anyway. And it's how we then channel some of that other funding to continue to support this kind of work and this holistic approach.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. Councillor Petty, you just wanted to finish off?
That's very kind, thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm really humbled to have our esteemed lineup here. I'm not sure if I can always promise we've got as many guests each time, but for me, it's been really exciting to hear about this work. I think a lot of this scope of work is quite hard to measure, and actually we've provided some data, but it's bringing it to life that makes it, the stories behind them, the things that really make sense of it. So thank you to all of you for the work you're doing, and I'm excited to be part of this lineup and taking a tiny bit of credit, but actually it's down to the really hard work. The other thing I just wanted to say is that partnership working is something that's often presented as a silver bullet that solves all sorts of problems. I generally find it's really difficult and usually fails. You end up with lots of people sitting around discussing what they're going to do and not much else. So it's absolutely amazing that we're in this place now where we're actually seeing those kind of efficiencies that Rob describes. That's the holy grail of making this thing work, and it's working right now. So I'm so excited we've got to that place. So thanks to everyone involved.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pitt and Oliver, for bringing the team for this very comprehensive and very detailed update. I think we can all agree it's been really, really helpful and useful. It's exactly what we asked for. So moving on to agenda item number 4, the Community Health and Wealth Building Strategy. I think we're still with Oliver and Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I like to think of myself as kind of an artsy sort of a person. Like if you see me on Zoom, I've got a guitar on one side of the wall and some vaguely failure stroke, maybe partially successful bits of pottery on the other side. But actually, I think I'm a man of science, really. And I really like to get down to the root causes of things and break things into their individual bits. And that, I think, explains why I'm really proud of Priority 1 and the way it's presented in our corporate plan. So improving the quality of life for local people, when we had a peer review challenge, the Cabinet was asked, what does that mean? That's so broad, it's virtually meaningless. And my response to that was that actually everything that we do as a council is about improving the quality of life for local people, whether it's in the short term, medium term, and long term. And I think to have that at the top line of what this council stands for is really powerful. And then it's broken down into improving the happiness and well-being of residents, keeping people out of crisis and helping people in crisis. So we've got some more detail there. Now, I'm not going to go through first principles for the entire document, and actually there's quite a lot of the sort of thought processes presented in the reports you've got in front of you. But where we've got to today, and actually I think this was in the report in July, is what does that improving the quality of life mean in practice, and what can the council, where should we focus our attention? And I'm really excited that the things we're talking about now are more money in your pocket, better physical and mental health, and a better support network, or perhaps more fulfilling social life. I think those are two sides of the same coin that mean different things to different people. But I think, like, when you kind of work through the kind of mechanics of trying to develop a policy, and then you sort of sit back and say, what does this look like? Actually, I think that's a really powerful message that anyone can relate to. Like, is that helping your life? If you say it to a 5-year-old or your great-grandmother, whoever, I think these are really meaningful things that will resonate with people. So I think we're onto something. And also, just to kind of, a lot of that is about kind of overall, it's kind of looking at supporting everyone in every situation. But I think if we improve the quality of life for everyone, I do think we have an impact on keeping people out of crisis. So a bit more money in your pocket is nice for everyone, but actually that thing of financial resilience is really powerful for avoiding those crises. And also just to recognise that financial resilience is really linked to health. There's lots of evidence to show these things. So there's kind of these virtuous circles that we can start to tap into. Now, the other point I just want to refer to in this introduction is that we recognise that, us setting up at the top of the table here, we're not the experts in everything. So we can design grant criteria, we can develop procurement policies that benefit the local economy, I hope. But we don't necessarily know what constitutes a healthy, happy life for the people who know what makes a healthy and happy life are the people living those lives. So that's why co-production and talking to residents is absolutely integral to this policy. So the last point I'll make is that why are we doing this now? So the corporate peer review challenged the council on how we're going to resource our Hunt's Future strategy. So this strategy was put together after talking to hundreds of residents across Huntingdonshire, and it looks at what we want to, what do we as a community want Huntingdonshire to look like in 30 years' time? And it's a really exciting document full of really innovative and brave ideas, but it can't sit on a shelf. I think we've got to, we're not the owners of that document, but we are the conveners of it. And I think it is incumbent upon us as a council to start to move the dial on that. And so I think this policy that you've got in front of you and the funds that's linked to it, I think does begin to do that. So it's looking at health embedded, it's looking at inclusive economy, and looking at pride in place. And I'm really excited to present this to you, and I'll hand over to Oliver. We look forward to your questions. Thank you.
So I think Councillor Pitt is very much introduced the document. As you'll see, there is a lot of similarity between what you've got here and the principles that we brought in July for your comment and input. Things we committed to do following the principles that we brought last time was to run a series of community co-production sessions with the communities. We've done that, some really exciting sort of feedback on that. I'm sure that'll be where a lot of your interest and questions will be. And the key things that came out of that was a real clear recognition of those kind of 3 priorities that we've said we'll kind of focus against. So that kind of economic success, social connection, and physical activity and health. For residents, like, those make sense to us. That feels right. The other big thing that came out of those groups was a huge amount of energy and creativity around ideas around how we do that. And I think it comes back to the kind of points that Councillor Tevlin made earlier about how do we create sustainability in Fen Stanton and Hilton, which is people recognise they're the things they want, but they know best how to achieve them in those communities. And actually the ideas that came forward, the energy that came forward was really huge and very significant. So we can certainly talk about that. So that co-production piece, I think, is really impactful, has kind of confirmed those areas as the ones where the energy is, and started to generate a series of schemes that ultimately could be worked up in terms of how that's delivered. So within the strategy, that real commitment to continuing that engagement, that co-production, in terms of supporting residents who know best about their lives and their communities of how to achieve some of those outcomes. I think the other bit that very clearly came out is the community are really keen to be involved, but they don't want to just talk. What they want is that things actually happen, that there's money to make things happen, and that things really deliver. And the big change since this was presented last time is the allocation of that, the allocation of a fund to support the delivery of this, a delivery fund, which is, as Councillor Pitt says, also links absolutely to the corporate peer challenge feedback, which is you need to be resourcing these priorities. So £750,000 over 3 years is proposed to be created as a scheme. I think there's some really important points to make in terms of the terms of that scheme, which is that's kind of pump priming money from us as a district council. You've heard already through the items today that there's a lot of funding from other partners going into the area. We would see that scheme, given those criteria, as being something that a range of people can contribute to, and is constantly being reimbursed because we're all trying to achieve the same thing. So actually, how do we attract some of that money in? Again, the answer I gave to your point of Councillor Bywater is I think where I would hope to get to is where interventions that we provide are making savings for other partners, that those savings go back into the pot to make a virtuous circle of reinvestment. That is not an easy thing to do. But I think that's the area where we're getting perilously close to being able to evidence that we can do too. So the principle of the scheme is there. I think critically, both from feedback from residents that we've spoken to, but how we're trying to design that scheme is residents don't care who does what. They don't know what an integrated care system is. They don't understand what a primary care network is. They don't know what a residents' advice and information team is. They just want people to be on their side. And central to this kind of approach is breaking down those barriers, removing bureaucracy, making it easy, and delivering services that make a difference. So I think the key aspects of that scheme is to make it easy to get the money to where it needs to be. Clearly, what we've got to do is make sure that public money is spent well and it's impactful, but to do that in the simplest way as we possibly can. So I think one of the big proposals today is we are committing to the creation of the scheme, but we would like to work with you to get your input into the terms of that scheme, how that criteria works. So one of the things I was going to ask for input on was potentially setting up a little working group where we can bring some of those proposals, seek your input and feedback around how we get the criteria for funding appropriate. But some of those, that funding can fund a range of areas. The 3 areas that we mentioned in the paper is, grant giving. So absolutely, where a community group wants to do something, we can give some grants. Projects. So if it's potentially a fairly detailed proposal around youth employment, for instance, we could absolutely use it to fund that where there's a gap to do it. But also there will be times where we need some skills and expertise. We need a bum on a seat to do some work. It won't necessarily be an HDC seat. It might be a CAB seat or whatever. But that might be we need someone to do some community engagement. We need somebody to do the work around progressive procurement to make sure we're spending more money locally. But we have those opportunities to break those boundaries down and deliver more of the stuff that we've talked about today. So I think that kind of gives you an introduction to the paper. I'm sure you've all read it. We talked about it in July. Very happy to take questions and thoughts around that moving forward.
So, anyone with any questions or comments on the policy? Councillor Hassel.
Work. Oh, that's worked. Excellent. Good. Yeah. So this whole thing is one of those. It's an area that's actually quite difficult for me because it's very much about heart and head. So listening to the previous presentation, very, very much heart. And many of you know, and actually I think I presented to this committee on the garden waste subscription service, and part of the 750,000 funding is going to come from, because that project has actually been way more successful than we expected. So there's a large amount of funding there, and I think there's a very strong linkage between all of our residents who have contributed to that and this project. So I think it's really important that if we are going to run a project like this, that we have some very clear success criteria. And when I went through the papers, I felt that was somewhat limited in terms of what this looks like. And added to my other experience from the combined authority where monies like this have been spent, is that I have to say the success hasn't been that great in terms of outcomes that are being expected. So that's quite a concern from my perspective. I guess looking at it from a resident's perspective as well is that Oliver, you and I just met earlier on with the chair of Southo parish council because the whole of last winter they were shipping sewage out in tankers from his village into. So our priority number one isn't just about the things that we've talked about earlier on, which I'm a massive fan. You all know that. It's also about making certain that just simple stuff like culverts are cleared out so they don't get flooded. It's about making certain that sewage doesn't accumulate and come back from people's toilets. And it does happen across Huntingdon, and it's strategic planning. And our business as usual and the Green Bins project was all about sustaining business as usual. Our business as usual, we are very good at it. We've just run a project that has exceeded all expectations. And £750,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in terms of the objectives that we're trying to achieve in terms of basically overcoming people's lifestyle issues and challenges and things like that, 750,000 is actually a drop in the ocean, whereas 750,000 into our business as usual operation, even if it's down to putting biodiesel in our refuse lorries, or for example, if we put some more money into planning so that we actually improved our planning processes, so that we actually build more new houses, which creates more affordable housing, creates more houses for the community. In its own way, that's giving people places to live. So to make the assumption that the only way that we can address our number one priority is by commissioning a project like this, where, if you're honest about it, the success criteria are always challenging. One of the even though I sat on the community chest, is that there were some that worked and some that didn't. And I think that if we put the money into business as usual, my advice, my recommendation back to Cabinet Chair is that they look at investing the money that's come through residents into business as usual, because I forever on the phone, it takes me months to get someone out to clear out a culvert that's stopping houses from being flooded, and invariably HDC arrives after the house has been flooded and not before. So the street cleaning, Southo Parish Council Chair was saying earlier on that he hadn't seen their streets being cleaned for 3 years. So I can't say, and Claudia knows, is that I disagree with anything. I know this is a subject close to your heart, and we've had many conversations, Oliver, about the thing about it is we do need to do what we're doing. We do need to get those partnerships going. We've just got a partnership that's going to deliver 2.9 million, and as you say, it doesn't really matter where the money comes from as long as it happens. I think I would rather the money be spent on our business as usual operation, delivering to all of our residents, and then work on just making absolutely certain that we get those grants, we get those partnerships, because really we need a diversion of the NHS funding in prevention, and we're in a fantastic position to do that, and I agree with everything that Oliver said. So this isn't me trying to kill the project, but I think that, I don't know, have we got enough of a pilot already from what we've actually done? But I think that because of where the funding's coming from for residents, I think it would be much better to direct it into business as usual. But I'll pause for comments there. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Martin. I have an affinity with everything you said. So ultimately, it's a political decision. And for the way I would frame it, well, there's various ways, but I think partly we've recognised through our corporate plan that is supported by, I think, not quite unanimously, but pretty close across the council, that these are the things that matter. And I think this proposal really speaks to that. But also it's about fundamentally the question is, when we've got £1, how can we have the biggest impact with that £1? And I agree with you that business as usual is fundamentally really important. I also think that business as usual is going pretty well. It's never going to be perfect, but I think it is going well. So where do we, is there a risk with that £1 to get a diminishing return in one place? or do some seed funding somewhere else. And I think, as you say, the risk of seed funding is it may turn out to be wonderful, it may end up to be a damp squib and the idea goes away. But we're not proposing putting everything into one basket here. We're going to be going out, and you mentioned a pilot, and I think that's the right word, because essentially it's going out, trying to do things that are going to be transformative, but having a lasting legacy beyond this initial £750,000. That might be because a project becomes self-sustaining in ways that we've heard about in the last agenda item, but it might also be because that project, the value of that is seen by the NHS, and they see that that pound gives them a payback of £5 saved at the A&E clinic. So I recognise what you say. I am really convinced that this is a really important bit of work that I'm keen that we see, proceed. But Oliver may have other comments, and I'm interested to hear from the room about views on this question.
If I can just come on that, I guess the thing about BAU is that you can't get a grant generally to assist with BAU, and the funding of this project has come from BAU effectively. So in my view, it should go back in.
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. So I think Councillor Pitt has picked up the sort of the political point. I just think some other ones. I think it's really important that we recognise this is one-off windfall funding. So you've mentioned the higher than expected take-up on the garden subscription service, which we don't expect to repeat because we're effectively at the level that we'd expect to be in year 3. We've just got there earlier. But actually, the bigger contribution in terms of unexpected windfall income has been the higher than expected interest rates, and the additional income that was reported last night, particularly on things like our SIL holdings, where we're holding money on account of other people, but actually, £1.2 million of additional income this year. Now, politically, decisions are being made to try and return that to priorities for local residents, and that's a decision for the cabinet. I think what I would say as an officer is, if you look at something like the cost of eviction to a council, it's about £10,000. So actually some of this, and you've heard some of the examples earlier, is preventative type activity that will absolutely defray costs on our BAU by preventing things happening that otherwise we'd have to pick up the tab for. And I think that's at the heart of it. I think in terms of BAU as well, and I will come back on flooding as we talked about it earlier, it's also about finding pockets of, increasingly what we see in the public sector system is lots of very bespoke project funding. And that becomes quite administratively burdensome. When you've got 4 project managers running 4 discrete projects with very clear criteria, what this provides is some flexible funding at times to join some of those things up. So for instance, you've heard today about how the movement of CAB into this building has, in their words, transformed what we're delivering for the money that we get. Now, if that costs £15,000 to organise all that and make it work, and they're the results, I think some of this fund can change some of those BAU delivery type activities, absolutely, to transform the way we deliver services. I wouldn't want to underestimate that. But in much the same way as in terms of flooding, we do now speak to flood groups before we clean streets. That is a bit of change where we actually reflect on some of those things. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. We've put a bid in as a district council into the county council only this week to bid for gully clearance, so that we can align the clearance of gullies with street cleansing, so we don't have that ungodly situation of sweeping the street into the gully and then the water getting out of the way. Now, ultimately, the county might accept that bid or not, but again, that would be another example of where we're trying to use bits of money to change the nature of how we work it, not just hand it out, not just hand it out as grants. The other factor is those bits around match funding and hopefully starting to get some of those savings coming back into the pot too, to make it that kind of sovereign wealth fund reinvestable proposition. I absolutely hear that the proof of the pudding will be in the testing of how successful we are in doing that. And I think that will be a key part of the reporting you've seen today, where we'll be coming back on an enduring basis to show you how's that working, where the results are being fully accountable for its allocation.
Councillor Hunt?
Thank you. I fully support this. It's one of those things that this kind of project and this kind of working is the kind of thing that I would say my community needs. Yes, this is not a huge amount of money in the terms of a council budget. Yes, this is seed funding for the future. Yes, we need to flesh out criteria about success, conditions, and so on and so forth. But this is the kind of stuff that can really be a shot in the arm for communities like mine. And this is why I'm really enthusiastic about it. And yes, might be right to consider this a pilot going forward. But I think this is what we do need to be doing, and I agree a political decision has been made, but I think it's the right one in this step. And fundamentally, like we've heard, this council has a windfall and an opportunity, and it's only right that we use that windfall correctly and take that opportunity. So I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. Would quite like to be involved in how that goes forward, and obviously you've mentioned reporting back to hear how it goes. But I'm quite curious about timelines for next steps, kind of thoughts. I know the paper refers to kind of the immediate term, the short term, long term is what's that in months to kind of think about that. But overall, I'm very positive about this, and I do think moving forward with this is the right decision.
So coming back on the timelines point, so what we always said would there would be an enduring process of community co-production. So we've had some success with that already. We're working up a program of additional sessions with the community over the next 3 months. So I think that's the key bit of, I think we've got to be very careful. If we say we're going to allocate resources to priorities, we don't then jump to, and we know what those, we don't know what's right for you. So, whilst that will be enduring, I think that period of initial engagement is really important. We've done well, I think, in terms of making sure that those sessions have been demographically representative. However, where we have seen some challenges is those groups, the seldom heard from groups, for instance. So we are underrepresented in some of the areas around potentially people who are out of work, those kind of areas, of doing some targeted work in the area, which I think is what we'd flagged in the principals paper originally. So doing some targeted work in some areas. We've got another workshop next week on the 12th. And I think in parallel, we can work up some of the criteria that will then apply to those priorities and how we fund it. So the simple answer, Councillor Hunt, is I would foresee coming back with worked up proposals around the actual application of the scheme around Christmas or the early part of next year, and then be in a position to kind of take that forward from there.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. So, I mean, the purpose of this report is to seek feedback from members and see if we support the motion. You totally have my support. I think it's a good use of the surplus money generated by the Garden Waste Subscription Service. I'm glad to see the monies go back into local communities. I do find bear with me, I've lost my notes. The progressive procurement part of this, whatever you want to call it. Are we just going to, for example, where we source our goods and services from, is it just companies we directly deal with, or we're going to ask those companies to do the same and also invest in local businesses and whatever?
So I'm pleased you picked up on the issue of progressive procurement. So I think at the heart of this, it's about leverage. It's how we, for minimal impact, maximise the kind of outcome that we can have. And I think one of that is about thinking about the decisions we make about how we run our business and what that means in terms of those local areas. So to your point, what that is about is making sure that in the decisions that we make about where we buy things from, they're informed, and we're always looking to maximise local employment because that will deliver better outcomes and all of those factors. So I think the key point is maximising it. In terms of some of the work we've done already, I can foresee opportunities working with local suppliers to inform them about what we want and how best to deliver those outcomes. Now, in that way, I think we increase the likelihood of local employment and some of those benefits from the things we buy. But bluntly, I don't care if Hunt's businesses are bought from by us or bought from by neighbouring councils. And if I make them more effective at winning contracts and they're employing Hunt's residents, I think we'd all benefit from that. So it's about making sure we've got the right criteria in terms of how we buy things. We'd already committed to updating our social value policy, but also some engagement and outreach with local businesses to make them, to improve their opportunities to win contracts from others as well. And again, what we'll be reporting on is the percentage of our spent with local businesses, and expecting to see that grow over time and be much harder in terms of some of the criteria we'd expect to see in terms of what they're delivering back for us, in terms of those contracts, in terms of things like apprentices, for instance, and, potentially, health support for their residents or any other things that kind of come out of that process.
I probably didn't explain it quite very well, but are we going to be asking our suppliers, for example, to source their goods from within the district as well, or are we just simply going to source stuff from local businesses ourselves?
More work needs to be done. I think it is a simple answer, sort of Councillor Shaw. So what we want to do is maximise the benefit locally. So that's absolutely what we want to do. I would expect we'd be wanting to do both. It is both buying locally, but trying to make sure that those people are also maximising that opportunity too. I think the second point is this is not just about HDC. So in establishing those rules, guiding those local businesses as well, the influence piece is the conversations that we've already had with Northwest Anglia Foundation Trust about making sure that when Hinchingbrooke is rebuilt and £750 million worth of funding goes in there, they're also making those decisions in terms of investment, not just on national frameworks, but how could we work in partnership to make sure those jobs arrive locally for Hunt's residents, the same for the police, the same for other partners too. So making sure there's a combined approach across all local businesses to deliver exactly what you've just said.
Has anyone got any other comments, observations? Personally, I think it's a brilliant strategy. I've seen it from the ground. I've applied for the grants and got them, seen it works. And though it does feel like it's risk, I accept what you're saying, Councillor Hassel. I also know the effect it's had in the community work that I do. And I'm really supportive of this strategy.
I guess my final point on this is I'm not saying this is not a worthwhile project. I think it is. I guess my question would be is if you took the risk, so which risk in the risk inventory does this solve? Or which number?
So I think I don't have a number, Councillor Hassel. But what I would say is it relates to a number. So one of the key challenges we've got is making sure that our income streams remain in advance of our demand stream. So, we've got more money coming in than we've got money going out. I think to Councillor Shaw's point about progressive procurement, the more we use our influence to support local businesses to thrive, the more business rates we receive off the back of it, the more people who are employed, which means the fewer people are likely to turn up in terms of need for housing or need for benefits or other areas in terms of support for those areas. And I think just thinking back to some of the conversations we've had about health, one of the things that I always speak about in this meeting is the changing demographic profile. And I think when you look at the kind of pressures we've got in terms of disabled facilities grants and the demand in terms of some of those areas, I think this kind of approach of making sure that older people are better supported, that we're doing more in those areas, will alleviate, a lot of pressure we've got on potential financial risk in relation to that as well.
Yeah, just to come back and play devil's advocate on that. So for example, if you spent the money on planning, we've had situations where people can't put a bathroom downstairs because someone has got cancer and things like that. Because of the delays in the planning process. So I guess the reason why I was suggesting the BAU side of things is that, yes, we know we've got a planning backlog. We know that we are stats on planning. We know that we want to do a peer review with the LGA, which I believe has been deferred. But ultimately, investing in our BAU will make a big difference to people's lives. If you take the instance on Buckton Marina where someone didn't attempted suicide just purely because there was a planning issue that wasn't resolved in a timely fashion. I think that planning issue has just actually been refused, but after 5 years. So I guess what I'm saying is that there are elements where you can achieve exactly what we want to achieve in terms of our corporate plan by investing in BAU if you did it carefully.
So I think you've very clearly articulated, your points there, Councillor Hassel. I can see Becky taking comments. I'm sure all of those will be fed back to Cabinet, along with the other sort of views and reflections from the scrutiny panel overall. So thank you.
councillors. Oh, Councillor Bywater.
I wasn't going to comment really, but I mean I agree with this paper. I think it's well put together, and it looks very positive. I guess I don't quite agree with this business as usual. Really, I'm from someone who's come from a background that I have, is adaptability and change is always good, really. And I think if we can explore every opportunity rather than just ploughing on because we've always done it this way, then I'm one for looking for change, really.
Thank you, Councillor Bywater. Is there any other comments? Councillor Shaw.
I did ask a question in the last meeting regarding HGC's own recruitment policy and the possibility of having a sort of recruit locally policy. Obviously, it's probably too late to get it in here, but what I was hoping that I had a quick Google. Now I'm obviously a HR expert. But basically, I believe you can recruit. Sorry, I've got a thick head today. It's not because it's not a protected characteristic. You can be biased towards someone's location, and I was hoping that perhaps either through this document or some other means that perhaps we could have a sort of a local recruitment policy.
I would need to check. I believe one of the metrics that we'll track is the percentage of locally employed people. So that kind of commitment, that desire is absolutely there, Councillor Shaw. Obviously, this is the kind of enabling strategy. So there'll be lots of specific actions underneath that will kind of develop as we go forward. And I think that's certainly something we'll look at. One of the areas we've looked at ahead of that has been we've already been having really active conversations with North West Anglia Foundation Trust around what we can do in terms of linking our residents with their jobs. And the only reason for that is they have more common, jobs. Where you look at us as an organisation, we've got lots of very diverse and different jobs. They've got, we need 50 of these, which in many ways makes those kind of recruitment pathways a bit easier. But we're already having conversations about what we can do, to Councillor Hassell's point earlier, of not just saying job available, but actually finding the people, speaking to the people, engaging the people, these are the right jobs for you, linking them through. And then we get, bluntly, people working in our key local industries who are already committed and embedded in the area are less likely to leave and go somewhere else. And that, that income, that employment is likely to go back into our local high streets, local shops. And again, to my answer to Councillor Hassell, hopefully reduce on any dependence they might have on public sector agencies because they're out of work and need help. So, let me reassure you that desire to do all we can to employ local people is absolutely there.
Councillor Hunt. Councillor.
Thank you. Just on the back of Oliver's comments there, I think, in the strategy, there's a reference in, I think it's one of the appendices about Preston. So this isn't something that, Oliver and I have come up with. This is a tried and tested methodology. And the stats from Preston are amazing. So I think Preston is a similar size to Huntingdonshire in terms of population. So £70 million more for the city economy, 200 million across the regional economy, and 1,600 more jobs. Those are figures that I long to see happening in Huntingdonshire. And I think that's more than just the council deciding how to run its own business. It's kind of ripple effect of the council inspiring other organisations. Those anchor organisations see that this works. So it's not about telling them they've got to do it. It's about them seeing for themselves that this has an intrinsic value. And that's what I really hope we can get out of this. Thank you.
Councillor Devlin.
Just really quickly on the point about employing locally, I know other authorities in Cambridgeshire, they offer a sort of scheme where if someone is outside of Cambridgeshire and they're moving to the location, they're offered a financial incentive as part of the contract. So just if there was an issue with that whole local issue, that might be something you consider in terms of the employment policy. Thanks.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, one final question on the fund, following on from Councillor Pitt's point, which I think feeds onto this. So on the community health and well-being, needs a better name. The CHWF. That's the working group's first point of business could be come up with a better name. But no, on a more serious point, it's on the partner working. It kind of we've acknowledged this as seed funding from HDC, that's 750,000 over 3 years. and how we want partners to contribute to that holistically. Have there been any thoughts about how that could happen so far? Have we had any interest already from partners, or or how are we going to go and almost canvas support for this?
Thank you. So absolutely. So that whole anchor institution model that Councillor Pitt talked about, we're absolutely having those active conversations with partners. So NWAF to the big dogs here, they've got a massive budget, and you know, fractions of a percentage of their spend being directed into hunts will be much more significantly the big double-digit increases of our spending. Just £1.5 billion budgets and so on. So absolutely been having some of those conversations. I think where some of this is critical is around the criteria and how we set it up. So, Councillor Bywater, you'll remember during COVID, we had the recognised organisation status. We made it easy to get money to community groups to do the things we needed to do. And we have something called minimum requirement standards, again, with partners. If they demonstrate they're well run, they have the right controls in place, it meets our duty for sort of financial control, we'll pass that money through really quickly. The reason I explain that is what we're doing in terms of those conversations is we'd want to get them all in a room, say, what's your criteria? How do we join it up? And as soon as they feel a sense of ownership and reassurance that criteria makes sense, rather than them replicating process next time, we say, why don't you just put it in the pot? Because we've all agreed what that criteria is collectively. We're all trying to achieve the same thing. And then if you're then someone seeking funding, rather than have to apply to 7 different things on 7 different forms, it's a really simple process. So we're already having that conversation around working with those people to agree that criteria. I think the first step is for hunts to say, what do we want to get out of the allocation of that? And I think there's some of the things where I suggest that working group, which I'd suggest in the next 3 months, but us talking through and coming to you with proposals around what that might look like too. But I think if we get that right, I would absolutely. People already say, well, this seems to make a lot of sense. We wouldn't have to have loads of people assessing loads of bids. It would all be done centrally. It would save us money. It'd be quicker. The benefits are being recognised.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt and Claudia and Oliver for your presentation. If anyone's interested in being in the working group, if you could email myself or Becky, and we'll sort one out. I think it's going to be a good. Yeah, I can see some hands already. I think it's going to be exciting, isn't it? Yeah. So in that case, I will draw this meeting to a close, and I thank everyone for their comments and their contributions.